My name is Alara Vance, and the life I knew ended not with a bang, but with the soft click of a door opening. I was in the small sitting room of the house we shared, mending a tear in my work overalls when Kalen Cross walked in. The look on his face was one I'd never seen in all our years together. A frantic, almost wild relief, as if he'd just escaped a burning building. "Alara," he began, his voice too steady, too rehearsed. "We need to call off the engagement. I don't love you. Not like that. And I have to believe that you, of all people, wouldn't want to be trapped in a marriage our parents arranged out of pity and old promises." The needle slipped, pricking my finger. A single bead of blood welled up, stark against the faded blue denim. I didn't look at it. I looked at him. And in that crystalline moment of shock, the final piece of a terrifying puzzle slid into place. I had woken up in my 22-year-old body 3 days ago, flooded with the memories of a bitter 20-year marriage and a lonely death. And now, seeing that specific liberated desperation on Kalen's face, I knew I wasn't the only one who remembered. In our first life, this conversation never happened. 3 days from now, during the final calibration of the new Ether Core lathe, his magnum opus, the project that would make his career, Kalen would collapse. Sudden cardiac arrest. As the on-site medic, I'd been the one to resuscitate him, my hands performing compressions on the chest of the man who would later look at me with nothing but cold obligation. Our marriage, a dictated sequel to his near-death experience, was a 20-year sentence of resentment. "Alara, if I hadn't been so worried about public perception, about people calling me an opportunist, I would have married Celine years ago," he'd spat at me during one of our countless arguments. "You clung to me out of desperation and guilt-tripped me into this. You are the chain around my ankle." The car accident that ended my first life was a blur of screeching metal and shattering glass. But the end was painfully clear. I was broken, fading in a hospital bed, and it was Celine he held, not me. It was Celine he whispered to as he signed the DNR order without a second's hesitation. His final words to me, whispered at my bedside when he thought I was unconscious, were a cruel joke. "Alara, this is all my fault. You've suffered so much because of me." After decades of that bitterness, I had finally let go. And then I woke up. 3 days before the wedding. What I hadn't anticipated was that Kalen had also been thrown back in time. And this time he was seizing his chance. He was determined to carve a path that had nothing to do with me, believing that I was the sole obstacle to his perfect life with Celine. "Alara, I know this isn't fair to you." Kalen's voice pulled me from the gut-wrenching memory reel. His tone was laced with a performative regret, as if he were bestowing a favor upon me. "But my feelings for Celine are real. She's the one I'm meant to be with. I won't sacrifice myself anymore, and I won't let her suffer in the shadows any longer." The arrogance in his voice, the unshakable confidence that he now controlled his destiny, was suffocating. If he was so sincere, why had he never said a word in our previous life? Why did he marry me only to sneak around with her for years, letting his contempt for me fester until it poisoned everything? I buried the searing hate and mockery that rose in my throat. Instead, I let my hands tremble. I made my voice wobble, layering it with shock and devastation. "After all these years together, Kalen? After everything our families have been through? You can just walk away that easily? Is it all because of Celine? The foreman's daughter?" I stared hard at him, searching for any flicker of doubt, any hint of the man I'd once thought he was. I had to keep him from suspecting that I, too, held the knowledge of a lifetime. He shifted uncomfortably under my gaze, sighing with theatrical weariness. "Alara, you can't force a heart to feel what it doesn't. A clean break is better than a slow decay. You need to accept this. It's better for both of us." We went in circles for a few more minutes, my performance of a heartbroken woman impeccable. Finally, I let my shoulders slump in defeat, my voice a broken whisper. I see I can't make you stay, Kalen. I only have one request. This engagement, it was our parents' final wish for us before they passed. Now that it's ending, will you at least come with me to their graves? To explain it to them? To let them know?" He hesitated, his eyes already looking past me toward the door and the freedom it represented. But then he nodded, seeing this as the final tedious piece of paperwork to be filed before his liberation. "All right. But I need to speak with Celine first. I don't want her to worry." He turned and left almost immediately, practically fleeing the room. I moved to the window and watched him run across the courtyard to where Celine Rossi was waiting, her figure anxious under the large oak tree. The afternoon sun caught them as they embraced. He spoke to her and her face transformed, radiant with triumph. She laughed, a sound I could almost hear through the glass, and kissed him passionately. "I knew your heart was only ever mine," I could imagine her saying. "Unlike some people who have to cling to ancient arrangements out of desperation." "Don't think about her," Kaylin would murmur before pulling her closer. Then as I watched, his expression turned serious. He held her by the shoulders, imparting some urgent instruction. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were. "Celine, don't forget. In the next few days you must go into the mountains. Find the silver vein root. The one that protects the heart. It's crucial." A quiet, bitter laugh escaped me. "Kaylin Cross, you think you have it all figured out. You know your body will fail you in exactly 3 days at the pinnacle of your career. And you think a few foraged roots are the key to your salvation. But you're wrong. The key was never the herb. It was me. My knowledge. My care. My family's forgotten medicinal wisdom that I poured into your recovery. This time I want to see if your precious, fated love can work miracles without me." The small family plot was on a hill behind the sprawling industrial complex, overlooking the smokestacks and warehouses. 2 simple, weathered headstones stood side by side. I knelt on the cool earth, my voice catching as I spoke to the silent stone. "I'm so sorry. I failed you. I couldn't keep my promise. Kaylin and it's over." The loneliness of my first life washed over me, the deep, bone-aching yearning for a home, for a family, that had kept me clinging to a hollow marriage long after I'd discovered his infidelity. I told myself it was to honor my parents' dying wish, but a larger part was my own desperate, pathetic need to hold on to the idea of us. I had shown him nothing but kindness, believing it would eventually earn at least his basic respect. But 20 years of devotion had only earned me a signed DNR. I should have seen it sooner. Kaylin Cross was emotionally barren, a man who saw gratitude as a debt and love as a transaction. A presence loomed behind me. I didn't need to turn to know it was him, hands shoved in his pockets, radiating impatience and cold indifference. His gaze fell upon the graves of the 2 people who had found him, a half-frozen orphan, and taken him in. The man and woman who had loved him as their own and begged their old apprentice, Master Thorne, to give him a job and a future. Not a flicker of remorse or warmth touched his features. He might as well have been looking at 2 interesting rocks. I finished my silent prayer and turned my head. "Kaylin, don't you have anything to say to them? My father was the one who pulled you from that snowdrift. My mother was the one who convinced Master Thorne to take you under his wing." His gaze flickered with a moment of pure annoyance before settling into a mask of righteous arrogance. An expression that screamed, "I've been reborn. Your petty guilt trips mean nothing to me now." "Elara, why dredge that up?" he said, his tone dismissive. "Your parents, wherever they are, would want us to be happy. I'm going to live an incredible life. I'll be successful. That's how I'll honor their memory. I'll take care of you too, just like they would have wanted. But taking care of you doesn't mean marrying you. I can be your brother. That should be enough." The audacity was breathtaking. He was dismissing a lifetime of debt and love as a minor inconvenience, reframing his abandonment as a benevolent act. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my knees, my movements stiff with controlled fury. "Just go, Kaylin. I want to be alone with them." He didn't need to be told twice. He turned and walked away, his stride quick and eager, leaving me alone with the whispering pines and the ghosts of my past. I placed a bunch of wild chrysanthemums, my mother's favorite, before the headstones. "You'd want me to be happy, wouldn't you?" I whispered, the wind drying the tears on my cheeks before they could fully fall. "You wouldn't want me to waste another lifetime on a man with a heart of ice." The rustling leaves sounded like an answer. I bowed deeply 3 times. "I promise you," I vowed, my voice firm and clear now. "In this life, Elara Vance will live for herself. And those who hurt me, they will pay. Every last one of them." My path was set. The game had begun. And he had no idea he was no longer the only player who knew the rules. The walk back from the cemetery took me past the factory's main bulletin board, the central nervous system for all gossip in our small industrial community. And just as I'd anticipated, a spectacle was in full swing. There she was. Celine Rossi, the foreman's daughter, preening at the center of a flock of wide-eyed younger women from the administrative offices. She was a vibrant peacock among sparrows, her laughter sharp and carrying. "Oh, you girls have no idea," she was saying, her voice dripping with condescending glee. "Kalen broke it off with his fiancée for me. He told me he's been sick of Alara Vance for ages. If it weren't for her being so pitiful after her parents died, he would have left her years ago. He's finally free to pursue his real happiness." A ripple of admiring murmurs went through the group. "So brave," one girl sighed. "To follow his heart like that. In my first life I would have lowered my head and hurried past, the humiliation burning my ears. But that Alara was gone. I had no intention of tolerating public shaming anymore." I took a breath, ready to dismantle her little narrative, but a voice, thunderous with fury, beat me to it. "Have you no shame, girl?" Master Thorne barreled through the crowd, his face a thundercloud. He was a bear of a man, his hands still calloused from a lifetime of work even though he now ran the entire machining floor. He shoved the onlookers aside without ceremony and glared at Celine with pure, undiluted contempt. "That foolish boy Kalen might have lost his mind, but I haven't. Even if I'm not lucky enough to have Alara as a daughter-in-law, I sure as hell won't have a vicious, gossiping magpie like you in my family." I stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, watching the tremor of anger in Master Thorne's broad back. My eyes stung with unexpected emotion. In my last life, after Kalen had let me die, it was this old man, his mind already beginning to fray at the edges, who had stubbornly remembered me. He'd sit in his workshop and mutter my name, shedding cloudy tears for the daughter he'd watched grow up. His unwavering, gruff affection had been the one thing that kept Kalen's public disrespect in check. He was the anchor Kalen had always resented but never dared to completely defy. The women, sensing real danger, scattered quickly. Celine, her face flushed with a mixture of fury and embarrassment, bit her lip, stamped her foot and flounced away. Master Thorne avoided looking directly at me, his own shame for his adopted son's actions written plainly on his face. He turned to leave and I took a step to follow to thank him, but a hand gently touched my elbow. "Alara? Dr. Vance." I turned. It was Julian Svensson, a quiet, brilliant engineer from the R&D department. He was a man of few words, with a thoughtful demeanor that stood in stark contrast to Kalen's brash confidence. He looked nervous. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. "Somewhere private? It's about Kalen and the new ether core lathe system." I nodded, my curiosity piqued. I led him to the empty infirmary, the sterile smell of antiseptic a familiar comfort. "What is it, Julian?" He took a deep breath, his expression grave. "Dr. Vance, I've kept this to myself for too long. The control system Kalen is claiming credit for, the one in the new lathe, it's not his." The air in the room seemed to still. "Go on." "It's almost identical to the research notes my mentor left behind. Dr. Eris." Julian's voice tightened with emotion. "Before he died, he told me the algorithm was brilliant but flawed. It needed years of testing and validation. But Kalen, he just took it. He copied the schematics, refined nothing and submitted it under his own name. He's presenting a potentially dangerous, unfinished system as his own breakthrough." A cold understanding washed over me. So that was the foundation of Kalen's brilliant career. Not genius. I remembered vague whispers in my first life, how Julian had tried to go to the deputy director with concerns, only to be quietly sidelined, his career stalling into obscurity. Kalen, the golden boy, had been untouchable. The project is the director's pet project. Kalen is his protege. The deputy director hates him but wouldn't dare interfere. I mused aloud, piecing it together. But I knew something no one else did. The newly appointed head of the Technical Review Board, Mr. Sterling, was a man of unshakable integrity. More importantly, his uncle was the incoming chairman of the Regional Industrial Oversight Committee. He was the one person who wouldn't be cowed by internal politics. I looked at Julian, a plan crystallizing in my mind. "Julian, I need you to write down everything you just told me. Every detail. Document the similarities between your mentor's notes and Kalen's design. Then, slide an anonymous letter into Mr. Sterling's mailbox." Julian's eyes widened, but a spark of resolve ignited within them. He nodded. "It's what Dr. Eris would have wanted. It's the right thing to do." After he left, I made sure the letter was written and discreetly delivered. Later that afternoon, as I was returning from my rounds, the sound of a heated argument erupted from the main machining floor. I didn't need to guess who it involved. I followed the noise. Master Thorn, his face purple with rage, was jabbing a finger at Kalen's chest. "You ungrateful wretch. You tell me what is wrong with Alara. A man needs a conscience, boy." Kalen stood beside the gleaming frame of the half-assembled ether core lathe, his face dark, that infuriating aura of reborn superiority clinging to him. "Father, please don't make a scene. I know where my future lies. I don't need you to dictate it to me. I won't make the same mistakes again." "Mistakes?" Master Thorn roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "My mistake was pulling you out of that snow. My mistake was convincing the foreman to give you a chance. Taking you in was the greatest error of my life." Celine was there, of course, clinging to Kalen's arm like a possessive vine. "Master Thorn, that's so unfair," she simpered. "Kalen is just pursuing his true happiness. You should be supportive. Get out." Thorn bellowed, snatching up a heavy wrench and slamming it onto a steel workbench with a deafening clang. Workers were peering in from every doorway. "Kalen, if you marry that creature, then don't you ever call me your father again. I, Gideon Thorn, have no son who is so disloyal and heartless." The gossip would be all over the factory by shift's end. Kalen Cross dumped the Vance girl for the foreman's daughter, and old man Thorn disowned him for it. I stepped forward, my heart aching for the old man. He saw me and immediately moved, placing his large body protectively in front of mine. "Alara, I am so sorry," he muttered, his voice thick with shame. Suddenly, Kalen pointed an accusing finger at me, his eyes blazing with sudden misplaced anger. "This is your doing, isn't it, Alara? Scheming behind my back, turning my own father against me? I'm warning you. My life is mine to control." Master Thorn moved faster than I thought possible for a man his size, stepping fully between us. "You worthless cur. You do a shameful thing and then have the audacity to blame her for it." Kalen's gaze remained locked on me over his father's shoulder, cold, impatient, and filled with a perverse sense of relief. He was free of me. He was free of the old man's expectations. He saw us both as weights holding him back from his glorious, reborn destiny. We were obstacles he had successfully cleared. Celine tugged on his sleeve. "Kalen, come on. Let's go talk to my father. Don't waste your breath on people who don't matter." They walked away without a backward glance. The moment they were gone, the fight seemed to drain out of Master Thorn. He slumped onto a workbench, burying his face in his rough, grease-stained hands. "Alara," he groaned, his voice hollow. "I failed as a father. A man like that, mark my words, he's headed for a fall. Yes, I thought, my heart hardening. He is. And it's coming sooner than you think." The only pity was that Master Thorn was leaving for a week-long procurement trip first thing in the morning. He would miss the main event. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the first threads of the web were being spun. All that was left to do was wait for the fly to land. The 3 days passed with a strange, suspended quality. The air in the factory hummed with more than just machinery. It crackled with whispered gossip about the dramatic breakup, Master Thorn's disownment, and Celine's triumphant gloating. I moved through it all like a ghost, tending to scraped knuckles and heat exhaustion in the infirmary, my face a placid mask that hid the storm of anticipation within. Finally, the day arrived. The official testing of the ether core lathe was a major event. Banners hung from the rafters of the main assembly bay. Every manager, foreman, and important figure from the regional industrial board was there. A sea of suits and expectant faces gathered around the gleaming, monstrous piece of machinery. And at the center of it all stood Kalen Cross. He looked like a man who had already won. Dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than my monthly salary, he stood tall, a confident smile playing on his lips as he addressed the crowd. He was the prodigy, the self-made genius, the author of his own destiny. "This integrated control system," he announced, his voice ringing through the bay, "represents a complete reimagining of precision engineering. It is a system I have independently developed from the ground up, featuring innovative harmonic dampeners and a proprietary..." I didn't listen to the rest. I stood off to the side, near the emergency medical station I had prepared, my fingers unconsciously checking the contents of the kit for the 10th time. Adrenaline, defibrillator pads, oxygen. A bitter, familiar routine. Before he could finish his grand speech, Celine made her entrance. She was a splash of garish crimson in a sea of gray and navy, her dress too formal, too attention-seeking for a factory floor. She flitted through the crowd of officials like a social butterfly, basking in her reflected glory. The moment her eyes landed on me, she veered over, her voice syrupy and loud enough to draw glances. "Isn't it thrilling, Elara?" she chirped, not even bothering with a greeting. "Kaelin is the youngest senior engineer in the sector's history. A true visionary. Some people must finally understand the difference between true brilliance and, well, common dirt." I didn't look up from my medical kit. "The heart doesn't care about brilliance or dirt, Miss Rossi. It only cares about rhythm. If you'll excuse me." Her smile tightened, but she flounced away, rejoining the adoring circle around Kaelin. The test began. The low hum of the lathe powering up vibrated through the concrete floor. Kaelin's hands moved over the controls with a fluid grace that was undeniably skilled. Lights on the main console blinked from amber to a steady, confident green. The machine whirred to life, performing its intricate dance with flawless precision. A wave of relieved applause began to build. It was working. It was a success. Kaelin shot a smug, victorious glance in my direction, his eyes saying everything his words couldn't. "See? I don't need you. I never did." "The ether core system test is a complete success," the project manager shouted, and the bay erupted into cheers. And in that exact moment, at the very peak of his triumph, the sound that had haunted my nightmares for 2 lifetimes cut through the celebration. A sharp, choked gasp. Kaelin's confident smile froze into a grotesque mask of surprise. His hands flew to his chest, clutching at the fine fabric of his suit jacket. The color drained from his face, leaving it a ghastly gray. His eyes, wide with a terror he alone understood, scanned the crowd wildly before locking onto Celine. He took one stumbling step toward her, his mouth working soundlessly, and then his legs buckled. He crashed to the oil-stained concrete floor with a sickening thud. Chaos. The cheers died, replaced by shouts of alarm. The crowd surged forward, then recoiled. Director Rossi, Celine's father, barked orders that no one heard. I grabbed my medical kit and pushed through the stunned onlookers, my training taking over, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I knelt beside him. His breathing was agonal, ragged. No pulse. Just as before. "Someone call for an ambulance. Now." I yelled, my voice cutting through the panic with practiced authority. I ripped open his shirt, reaching for the defibrillator pads. "No. Get away from him." Celine scrambled to my side, shoving me hard, her face a mess of tears and fury. She clutched a small, cloth-wrapped bundle to her chest. "Elara, what do you think you're doing?" she screamed. I looked up, my expression one of pure, professional concern. "Miss Rossi, please step aside. The patient is in cardiac arrest. He needs immediate emergency care." Kaelin's eyes fluttered open for a second, meeting mine. Panic and raw hatred flared in them. He knew. He knew what was happening, and he knew I was his only real chance. But his voice was gone. "Miss Rossi," I said, my tone firm and leaving no room for argument. "You need to calm down. I am a certified medic. If you care about Kaelin, you will let me do my job and stop interfering. Herbs take time to work. Right now he needs CPR." Everything I said was medically accurate, ethically sound, and perfectly responsible. To everyone else, I was the rational professional. To Celine, I was a usurper, a snake trying to steal her moment. "I said get away," she shrieked, her voice hysterical. She threw herself over Kaelin's body, shielding him from me. He told me the silver vein root would save him. He has it all under control." She frantically unwrapped the bundle, revealing a few brittle, silvery leaves. She tried to pry his jaw open, forcing the dry leaves into his mouth, her hands shaking violently. "What is your real game, Elara Vance?" she hissed, her words meant only for me. "Trying to save him again so you can claim he's indebted to you? So you can cling to him like you always have? Not this time. He's mine. Only I can save him." A murmur of disbelief ran through the crowd. The looks of sympathy for her began to curdle into confusion and discomfort. Director Rossi's face was a dark storm of embarrassment and worry. I held my hands up in a gesture of surrender, reluctantly pausing my efforts. I turned to the director, my expression a mask of regret and professional frustration. "Director Rossi," I said, my voice carefully measured. "As you can see, the patient's loved one is highly emotional and is preventing me from administering critical care. I'm afraid that if this life-saving intervention is delayed any further," I let the sentence hang, the unspoken consequence, "his death will be on her hands," echoing in the silent bay. The director opened his mouth, conflict raging in his eyes, but all he could manage was a heavy, defeated sigh. He looked at his daughter, a mess of tears and leaves, and said, "Celine, let Dr. Vance through. She's the professional. We don't need the herbs." But Celine was beyond reason. "No," he told me. "The root will work," she sobbed, finally managing to shove a few crushed leaves into his mouth. They mixed with his saliva, a pathetic, desperate offering. The whispers grew louder. "She's lost it. He told her leaves would save him. Is she mad? Look at him, he's gone. What are a few dried weeds going to do? She's panicking, poor thing. But stopping the doctor, that's just wrong." I stood back, silently watching the grotesque spectacle. In my previous life I had fought death for him. I had poured every ounce of my skill and knowledge into those critical minutes. This time I would let nature take its course. I would let him see. I would let him experience whether his so-called true love and her miracle cure could actually cheat death. The seconds ticked by, each one a lifetime. The wail of an ambulance siren pierced the air, growing louder, cutting through the suffocating tension. It was the sound of hope, but it was far too late. Just as the paramedics burst through the doors, a collective, shocked gasp rippled through the crowd. Kalen's body jerked. A ragged, wet cough tore from his throat, expelling the leaf fragments. His eyes flew open, blinking against the harsh lights. He was alive. Somehow, against all odds, he was alive. The collective mood in the bay swung on a dime. Shock turned to stunned relief, then to murmurs of awe. Celine, weeping with hysterical joy, cradled his head in her lap. "I saved you. I told you. I saved you," she cried over and over. I stood motionless, a chill settling deep in my bones that had nothing to do with the bay's draft. It wasn't possible. The root was a supportive medicine, a preventative measure. It wasn't a miracle cure for full cardiac arrest. Unless he had taken more than just the root. Unless he had prepared for this. The formulas I had developed over years in our first life. The precise tonics, the strengthening elixirs I'd forced down his throat during his recovery, he must have remembered them. He had premedicated himself. He had given himself a fighting chance, and he had let Celine take the credit, making her his savior. He hadn't just planned to leave me. He had planned to survive without me and to ensure his beloved got all the glory. The game had just become infinitely more complicated. The following weeks were a study in whiplash. The factory buzzed with a new, incredulous gossip. "Did you hear? Kalen's not just awake, he's already walking around." "No." They said even if he lived, he'd be a vegetable. "It's true. Celine's at the hospital day and night, brewing him special tonics, feeding him herself." Incredible. She really did save him. We were wrong about those herbs. I heard it all from my post in the infirmary, my hands steady as I bandaged a wound or dispensed aspirin, my mind racing. Celine Rossi, a woman who I was fairly sure couldn't tell basil from belladonna, was suddenly a master herbalist? It didn't add up. My theory solidified. Kalen had remembered the complex recovery regimens from our past life. He had guided her, turning her into his unwitting nurse and, more importantly, his public-facing miracle worker. His recovery wasn't just medical, it was triumphant. He returned to the factory not as a weakened invalid but as a conquering hero. He claimed his brush with death had granted him a profound clarity, a spiritual awakening that fueled a new wave of genius. He solved several lingering technical problems with the ether core system, solutions I recognized instantly as the final, polished versions of the notes Julian had told me about. The stolen work was now being presented as divine inspiration. Overnight his legend grew. He was the brilliant engineer who had cheated death and returned smarter and stronger. Investors flocked to him. The regional news did a feature. He was the golden boy, brighter than ever. And at the peak of this dizzying ascent, he and Celine announced their engagement. The wedding was a spectacle planned for 2 weeks later, the social event of the season. I received my invitation, of course. It was delivered not by post but personally by Celine. She swept into the infirmary, dressed in another expensive, too ostentatious outfit, her face glowing with vicious victory. "Ilara," she said sweetly, placing the thick gold-embossed card on my desk. "Kalen insisted you be invited. He said you and Master Thorn are the only family he has left. And since the old man is still away on business, you as his dear sister, simply must come and witness his happiness." I smiled a thin, cold smile and picked up the invitation. "Of course I'll be there," I said, my voice even. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The day of the wedding, the factory's main hall was transformed. Gold banners, overflowing flower arrangements, a string quartet. It was a vulgar display of wealth and ego. Kalen stood at the podium delivering a speech that lasted nearly an hour. Every word was dripping with faux humility and grandiosity. He spoke of his second chance at life, his boundless love for Celine, the angel who had pulled him from the abyss. The silver vein root became a mythical talisman. He was the hero reborn through love and miracle cures. Celine clung to his arm, playing the part of the blushing, devoted bride-to-be to perfection, dabbing at non-existent tears with a lace handkerchief. The performance was nauseatingly effective. Several women in the audience were genuinely weeping. I sat in the very back, in the most shadowed corner I could find, a faint smirk of contempt on my lips. "You think you've won, Kalen Cross? You think the half-remembered, stolen fragments of my knowledge are enough to secure your destiny?" I knew something he didn't. The silver vein root, while potent, harbored a latent toxicity. It was a finicky plant. Used correctly with the proper balancing agents my family's journals detailed, it was a powerful restorative. Used alone, in large, rushed doses to force a rapid recovery, it built up a dangerous residue in the nervous system. It created a metabolic debt that would eventually come due. And when combined with a certain common catalyst, the reaction was swift and devastating. I had prepared a very special wedding gift for him. As the ceremony neared its climax, Kalen gazed adoringly at Celine. He raised his crystal flute of champagne for a toast, ready to seal his victory. "To my savior," he proclaimed, his voice ringing through the hall. "To my future." He drank deeply. The moment the champagne passed his lips, his triumphant smile vanished. His face went from tan to a sickly greenish-white in the space of a heartbeat. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor, the expensive bubbly wine splashing like blood on the pristine tiles. "Kalen? What's wrong?" Celine's happy expression hadn't even faded before it twisted into confusion, then fear. He clutched his abdomen, a muffled, animalistic groan of pain escaping him. His body convulsed. His legs trembled violently, and then, under the horrified gaze of every single wedding guest, a dark, wet stain spread rapidly across the front of his expensive cream-colored trousers. The sharp, acrid smell of urine cut through the scent of flowers. A wave of stunned, disgusted silence swept the room. Then came the gasps, the shrieks, the whispers of utter disbelief. "My God, what happened?" His eyes rolled back into his head and he collapsed to the floor, unconscious, lying in a pool of champagne in his own waste. The perfect wedding descended into absolute chaotic horror. At the hospital, his condition spiraled. High fever, violent convulsions, uncontrollable tremors. The side effects he had suppressed with his aggressive, unguided herbal regimen surged back with a vengeance, overwhelming his system. Director Rossi, terrified for his daughter and his own reputation, pulled every string, flying in a team of top specialists from the capital. Days later, the lead specialist, an elderly man with a grave demeanor, delivered the diagnosis to a ashen-faced Director Rossi. I heard it through the factory grapevine, each detail more satisfying than the last. "The patient has ingested a powerful and conflicting cocktail of herbal compounds," the expert said. On the surface, they forced a rapid recovery, but in reality, they catastrophically overdrew his body's resources. The damage to his central nervous system is extensive and likely irreversible. We can stabilize him, but a full recovery is, I'm sorry to say, virtually impossible. I was in my small apartment, peacefully watering my window box of herbs, when I heard the news. A deep, profound sense of justice settled over me. That Kalen was my wedding gift to you. The champagne was just a harmless tonic. Who could have known it would react so violently with the poison you've been stuffing yourself with? You didn't die on the factory floor. So now live. Live with the consequences. Live with every kind of suffering. His body was ruined. Though director Rossi managed to pull enough strings to let him keep his nominal title and a pension, his career was over. What project would ever trust a man who could seizure and lose control of his basic functions at any moment? Who would follow a leader who had been publicly humiliatingly broken? If he had been a different man, he could have faded into a quiet, comfortable retirement. But this was Kalen Cross. He remembered a life of glory and respect. This existence, a life of being whispered about, pitted, a figure of ridicule and disgust, was a fate worse than death for him. I could imagine him in his hospital bed, then later in a quiet, dark room, gnawed by a bitterness so profound it would eclipse any he had ever felt for me. And it was far from over. The anonymous letter Julian and I had planted was still out there, a time bomb waiting to detonate beneath the ruins of his life. His fall from grace was only half complete. Peace did not return to my life so much as it settled over it like a layer of fine dust after an explosion. The immediate drama was over, but the aftermath was everywhere. The factory, once abuzz with Kalen's genius and Celine's theatrics, was now hushed, speaking in the low, serious tones of a scandal whose full dimensions were still being measured. I threw myself into my work at the infirmary. With the knowledge of 2 lifetimes, the practical experience of the first and the studied academic focus of the second, my proficiency was no longer just competent, it was preternatural. A persistent cough that had stumped others? I identified it as a rare allergic reaction to a specific metal dust and prescribed a simple antihistamine. A deep laceration from a snapped cable? My stitches were neat, efficient, and left minimal scarring. Word spread quickly. The workers, a pragmatic and loyal bunch, began calling me Doc Alara, or more affectionately, the miracle worker of the machine shop. In the quiet hours, I did something I should have done long ago. I opened the old cedar chest that held my father's life's work. His journals were not just notes. They were intricate maps of the human body, beautifully illustrated and filled with observations that blended traditional plant lore with a modern scientific curiosity. I began to organize, cross-reference, and combine his wisdom with contemporary medical texts. I wrote papers on the anti-inflammatory properties of local mountain flora and treating repetitive strain injury in manual laborers, a holistic approach. I submitted them to professional journals under a pseudonym at first, then gaining confidence under my own name. They were published. They generated letters, questions, a quiet buzz in medical circles far removed from our grimy industrial town. The factory directors who had always seen the infirmary as a necessary expense now saw it, and me, as an asset. I was promoted to head of medical services, a title that came with a modest raise and a great deal more autonomy. Julian Svensson, freed from the shadow of the man who had stolen his mentor's work, began to flourish. Unlike in our first life, he wasn't marginalized into bitterness. He was quiet, steadfast, and brilliant. He became the go-to engineer for solving persistent, gnawing technical problems, the ones Kalen had always dismissed as unimportant. He earned the respect of the floor managers and the cautious admiration of the directors, not with flashy speeches, but with quiet, undeniable competence. A bond, forged in shared secrecy and a desire for justice, grew between us. He wasn't slick or charming. His attempts at conversation were often awkward, his jokes were often from a science periodical, but his kindness was as solid and real as forged steel. On nights I worked late, a thermos of hot soup would appear on my desk. When I looked tired, he'd suddenly remember a fascinating article on new welding techniques that he thought might distract me. In him, I found a steadiness I hadn't known was possible. The frozen core of my heart, encased in the bitterness of my first life, began to thaw under his consistent, gentle warmth. A year after Kalen's fall, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Julian found me in the small garden I'd started behind the infirmary. He was blushing furiously, clutching a small, slightly crumpled bouquet of wild asters and goldenrod he'd clearly picked himself on the hillside. "Alara," he said, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. He thrust the flowers toward me. Would you consider being with me?" I looked at the honest hope in his eyes, at the humble, heartfelt offering in his hand, and I felt a genuine smile spread across my face for the first time in what felt like centuries. I took the flowers. "Yes, Julian. I would." We were married in a simple civil ceremony. There was no gold leaf, no string quartet. Master Thorne, back from his extended trip and heartbroken but resigned over Kaelin, gave me away. A few close colleagues from the floor and the office attended. We had a simple meal at a local pub. It was quiet and it was real. My heart, for the first time in either of my lives, felt not like it was soaring, but like it was finally, firmly on the ground. I was home. Meanwhile, the time bomb Julian and I had planted finally detonated. Mr. Sterling, the technical review chief, was a man of meticulous patience. He had received our anonymous letter and, instead of launching a public inquiry, had spent nearly 2 months conducting a quiet forensic investigation. He interviewed old-timers, tracked down archived blueprints, and crucially located the original annotated research notes of Julian's mentor, Dr. Eris. The evidence was irrefutable and damning. Kaelin's revolutionary system was a near-perfect copy. But the scandal grew worse. Mr. Sterling's investigation uncovered that Dr. Eris's notes were filled with warnings. Annotations in the margins highlighted design flaws, unverified stress points, and potential failure modes in the harmonic dampeners. Kaelin, either unable to solve these complex problems or too eager for glory to care, had ignored them all. He had installed a fundamentally flawed system. In our first life, these flaws had manifested as occasional mysterious malfunctions. A seized gear here, a misaligned calibration there, things Kaelin, with his silver tongue and rising star power, had smoothed over as teething problems. Safety protocols were more lax then. No one dug deeper. But now, under the magnifying glass of a province-level investigation triggered by Mr. Sterling's report, these flaws were exposed as catastrophic accidents waiting to happen. A failure in the main dampener at full operational speed could shatter the lathe's core, sending shrapnel flying like shrapnel. Could have killed someone. The news broke like a tsunami. The man hailed as a genius was publicly unmasked as a thief and a fraud. Worse, he was a danger to his fellow workers. All the accolades vanished. His private office was sealed shut. The Ether Core project was suspended indefinitely for a complete safety overhaul. Director Rossi, already on thin ice after the wedding debacle, was penalized for gross oversight and nepotism. He was suspended pending a full review, his career effectively over. The house of cards Kaelin had built with stolen blueprints and lies had collapsed, and it had buried everyone standing too close under the rubble. It was during this final unraveling that he came to see me one last time. I was sorting patient files when a shadow fell across the doorway. I looked up. Kaelin stood there, but it was a ghost of the man I'd known. His clothes were rumpled and stained, his hair was lank and greasy. His eyes were the worst part, red-rimmed, hollow, burning with a desperate, frantic light. "Elara," he croaked, his voice raspy. I know I was wrong. About everything. It was all my fault. I shouldn't have trusted Celine. Please, you have to help me. I know you're gifted. You know a way to fix this, to fix me, don't you?" He stumbled forward, trying to grab my hand. I recoiled, pulling back from his touch as if from a hot stove. "Kaelin," I said, my voice cold and flat. "There is nothing between us. If you're unwell, you need to see the specialists in the capital. This is a factory infirmary. I don't treat complex neurological conditions. No. Elara, please." His voice cracked with desperation. "I know you're angry, you have every right to be. But if you save me, I'll do anything. I'll divorce Celine. We can be together again, okay? I'll treat you right this time, I promise." Together again? The sheer, staggering audacity of it almost made me laugh aloud. "Kaelin," I cut him off, my voice sharp as a scalpel. "Have you completely lost your mind? Do I look like I collect garbage? The sight of you makes me sick." The blow landed. His whole body flinched as if I'd struck him physically. The carefully constructed arrogance finally shattered completely, and what was left was a raw, terrified child. "I was reborn," he choked out, the confession tearing from him. "I came back. I thought I could fix my one regret, I could climb even higher. I knew what would happen in 3 days. That's why I told her to get the root. I remembered the formulas. I thought I had it all under control." He looked up at me, his bloodshot eyes wide with a pain and disbelief that was almost pitiable. "In the last life, nothing happened to me. It was you. You were always the one saving me. And now it's not too late, is it? If I come back to you now, you'll still save me, won't you? You have to." The final piece of his delusion was laid bare. He didn't want me. He wanted my knowledge. He wanted the safety net I provided. Even now, at his absolute nadir, he saw me not as a person, but as a tool for his own preservation. What are you talking about? I snapped, feigning ignorance one last time. If you've gone insane, go check into a psychiatric hospital. But right now, get out. I pointed to the door, my arms steady, my voice final. Don't ever come back here. If you do, I'll call security. Whether you live or die, Kalen Cross, it has nothing to do with me anymore. The light in his eyes guttered out. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. He was completely, utterly broken. He turned and stumbled out of the infirmary, a shattered man shuffling into the twilight. I felt no triumph, no pity, just a cold, quiet finality. The scales were balanced. He had crafted his own hell and I had simply closed the door behind him. Years have a way of softening even the sharpest edges of memory. The relentless gossip about Kalen Cross and Celine Rossi eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals, triumphs, and the simple daily rhythms of life at the factory. I heard about Kalen's end in fragments, passed along through the same grapevine that had once celebrated him. After his dismissal was finalized, his health continued its slow, irreversible decline. The tremors never left him. The shame never left him. Celine, it turned out, was not equipped for the role of long-suffering caregiver. The woman who had vowed to be his savior could barely stand the sight of the ruined, incontinent man he had become. When he hit absolute rock bottom, penniless, living in a subsidized studio apartment on the edge of town, she served him with divorce papers and vanished. A minor winter chill, the kind a healthy body would shrug off in a day, settled in his lungs. Weakened and alone, he didn't have the strength to fight it. He was found a week later by a concerned neighbor. The official cause was pneumonia. The unofficial cause was a complete and total surrender. I felt a quiet pang, not for the man he became, but for the boy my parents had pulled from the snow. His story was a tragedy of his own making, a warning etched in a life wasted. Years after that, a new transfer from another district mentioned Celine's fate in passing over lunch. After the divorce, her reputation in tatters, she'd quit the factory and married a wealthy, older businessman from a distant province. The marriage, I was told, was not a happy one. She had never outgrown her spoiled, petulant nature, and her new husband had little patience for it. The gossip spoke of verbal tirades and later of physical abuse. Her life became increasingly isolated and miserable. The final report was that she had begun acting erratically, delusional, telling anyone who would listen that she wanted to go back to her previous life, to when she was the foreman's daughter, the beloved fiancée of a brilliant man. In the end, she was found in her lavish, lonely house, her wrists opened with a shard of broken mirror. The news gave me a shudder, a cold ripple across the still waters of my contentment. Had she been reborn too? Had she carried the memory of that fleeting, triumphant period into a life of misery, forever tormented by the comparison? Perhaps. But it didn't matter. Whatever she was, whatever she had been, it was over. The ghosts of my past were finally, truly at rest. I was walking through the city park with Julian and our 1-year-old son Leo. The afternoon sun was warm on our faces. Leo was giggling, bundled in Julian's strong arms, reaching for a brightly colored leaf. Julian, with the effortless grace that still surprised me, caught our son's tiny hand with one of his own and with the other, gently smoothed a stray strand of hair the breeze had blown across my face. His touch was warm, his smile quiet and sure. In his eyes I saw a future, not a dazzling, dramatic one like Kalen had always chased, but a deep, steady and enduring one. A life built on respect, on shared quiet moments, on love that was a choice renewed every day, not a chain of obligation. I had spent one lifetime tied to a man who saw me as an anchor dragging him down. In this life I had found a man who was my foundation, allowing me to build something new and strong and wholly my own. The world was bathed in the golden light of a peaceful evening. My son giggled. My husband held my hand. The past was a closed book. In this life I never fell for a heartless man again. I was finally living the quiet, happy life I had deserved all along. The end.